What if we told you that one of the smallest countries in Africa accomplished something that some of the most advanced economies in the world find difficult to achieve? Under the incredible leadership of President Ibrahim Traore, Burkina Faso has completely eliminated its $4.79 billion national debt without accepting any assistance from the West. Yes, you heard correctly, no compromises, no strings attached, and no loans. For many years, it was believed that African countries would never be financially independent. However, Traore made it a reality rather than merely imagining it. How did he achieve it? What tactics did he use to transform a nation that was frequently eclipsed by its more affluent neighbors into a shining example of independence? This is Africa's narrative, not just Burkina Faso's, and it must be told. You can't just call Ibrahim Traore a leader. Traore thrives on questioning the status quo. When many other leaders are content to keep things as they are, when Traore took power, Burkina Faso was in terrible shape. The country was drowning in debt, its resources were being plundered, and its sovereignty was jeopardized due to decades of economic mismanagement. Hope was in short supply, and the populace was disillusioned. For the majority, obtaining further loans from foreign governments or international organizations would have been the sensible course of action. After all, this has historically been the path taken by countries facing comparable challenges. However, Traore adopted a different strategy, a more audacious one. In his opinion, Burkina Faso had all it took to be independent. Unlocking its potential and inspiring people to believe in a common goal of independence were crucial. Traore's strategy was not only groundbreaking, but also dangerous. By turning down the safety net of foreign aid, he exposed Burkina Faso to serious economic difficulties. However, he also laid the groundwork for a historic shift that would not only settle the country's debt, but also change its course for the future. This boldness to question long-standing structures is what makes Traore's narrative so compelling. But to fully comprehend the scope of his accomplishment, we must examine the details of Burkina Faso's transition. When Traore assumed control of Burkina Faso, the statistics presented a dismal image. The nation owed $4.79 billion, an enormous amount for a country with limited economic infrastructure. However, Traore viewed these figures as challenges that could be overcome with the right approach, rather than as insurmountable barriers. He stated that because the goal was to protect their wealth, the army would go to any lengths to do so. He explained that their wealth had turned them into victims, and that imperialists sought wealth to retake and uphold their subjugation at all costs. He firmly declared that Burkina Faso would never give up and would ensure its security. He emphasized that there would never be an abdication from Burkina Faso and that they would continue to fight. He described the people of Burkina Faso as proud, valiant, and deserving, affirming that they would continue on their path. He warned that anyone who fantasized about Burkina Faso pleading to return to slavery needed to understand that they had failed. He insisted that those who had risked their lives in the past had instructed them to continue fighting until they achieved complete freedom and independence. One of his first actions was to identify the sources of financial leakage in the country. He pointed out that although Burkina Faso had abundant natural resources, particularly gold, not much of the revenue remained within its borders. Foreign companies had controlled the mining industry for many years, reaping enormous profits while contributing little in taxes or royalties. By renegotiating contracts to guarantee Burkina Faso a more equitable portion of earnings, Traore's administration took a firm stand against these exploitative practices. Additionally, he took tough measures against illicit mining operations that had embezzled millions of dollars in profits. However, resource management was only one aspect of financial reform. Budgetary restraint was also a top priority for Traore's administration. Government funds were reallocated to vital sectors like infrastructure development, and debt repayment and wasteful spending was reduced. Austerity wasn't the point here. Making sure that every dollar spent served a purpose was the goal. But it was Traore's capacity to include the populace that made his strategy genuinely revolutionary. He presented debt repayment as a national purpose rather than a government obligation. This feeling of collective accountability served as a catalyst for Burkina Faso's economic recovery. But why was debt repayment so crucial for countries such as Burkina Faso? Debt is more than just a balance sheet figure. It is a control mechanism. Like many African countries, Burkina Faso was entangled in the web of reliance created by global financial institutions. For many years, these loans frequently had a catch. structural adjustment plans that imposed restrictions on a nation's ability to allocate its funds, rank its industries, and even control its resources. Foreign interests were given precedence over local demands in this system, since the conditions were created to guarantee payback rather than to empower. For example, a large portion of Burkina Faso's population depends on the agriculture industry for their livelihood. Structural adjustment programs frequently called for market liberalization, which meant cutting subsidies for domestic farmers to make room for imported agricultural products. In principle, this might have increased market competition in Burkina Faso, but in reality, it inundated the local economy with low-cost imports, severely harming indigenous output. Food security decreased, farmers found it difficult to market their produce, and the country's reliance on outside resources for survival grew. This was a loss of sovereignty as much as an economic one. Traore was well aware of this dynamic. He saw debt as more than just a financial hardship. It represented dominance from without. Each dollar due to foreign creditors was an additional dollar that could not be used to fund the construction of infrastructure, hospitals, or schools. Even worse, Burkina Faso's capacity to rule itself was undermined by each policy imposed by creditors. This loss of liberty affected the lives of regular people in very tangible ways. It wasn't merely an abstract concept. For Traore, it took more than just budgetary balance to pay off the loan. The goal was to liberate Burkina Faso and other African countries from a system that had trapped them in cycles of dependency and poverty. This was not only an economic act, but also a political one. By paying off the debt, Burkina Faso was at last able to make choices that put the interests of its people ahead of satisfying the demands of international organizations. Furthermore, it is impossible to overstate the psychological effects of debt. Debt had been a national embarrassment for many years. The idea that Burkina Faso, and consequently Africa, could not prosper without the help of more affluent, developed countries was reinforced by this. Erasing this obligation restored national pride in addition to economic sovereignty. It made a strong statement to the globe instead of pleading for assistance. Burkina Faso was now a strong nation prepared to take control of its own fate. Additionally, this financial freedom paved the way for more extensive changes. Burkina Faso could refocus resources on internal concerns once the debt was paid off. It could make educational investments to provide the next generation with the skills they need to lead and create. It could enhance healthcare by bringing vital services to underprivileged areas. It could facilitate trade, link communities, and construct infrastructure. In short, debt repayment served as a means to end the cessation of outside authority and the start of individual autonomy. However, the ramifications of Traore's decisions for Africa as a whole were arguably its most revolutionary feature. On a continent where numerous countries deal with comparable issues, the success of Burkina Faso became a testament to what is possible. It contested the idea that debt is an unavoidable fact of life for developing countries. It demonstrated that financial independence isn't simply a pipe dream, and encouraged other leaders to think of daring alternatives to reliance. It's a measurable objective that can be accomplished with the correct leadership and direction. But how did Traore manage to pay off this debt? Ibrahim Traore's strategy was both revolutionary and strategic. Paying off the $4.79 billion national debt without the assistance of the West was no minor accomplishment. Using Burkina Faso's natural riches, enforcing strict economic regulations, diversifying sources of income, and encouraging unity among his people were all key components of his success. Each phase was meticulously designed to guarantee the nation's long-term viability, while achieving the ultimate objective of financial independence. An essential component of Traore's plan was Burkina Faso's gold riches. The nation has enormous unrealized potential in its mining industry, being one of Africa's leading producers of gold. But for a long time, multinational companies controlled the sector, taking enormous profits while providing Burkina Faso with little in the way of benefits. Traore renegotiated contracts with foreign mining corporations to recover this wealth, claiming that the existing accords were exploitative and unjustly favored international firms.